Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Melanie Loisem, Commissioner at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection and co-chair of the Maine Climate Council, joined today by my co-chair, Hannah Pingree. Appreciate everyone taking the time with us this morning on a beautiful spring morning. We've got a pretty full agenda. There's been a lot that's happened, a lot that was accomplished by the legislature, a great deal of federal funding to talk about. And so we're excited to walk you through many of the developments that have happened in the last few months that pertain to the strategies in the Climate Action Plan, Maine Won't Wait. And I'll turn it over to my co-chair, Director Pingree, to provide you with a little more detail on that.
Great. Well, thank you, Melanie, and great to see so many Climate Council members here. You're going to hear from a number of the co-chairs and some of the members of our varying committees and staff this morning. Looks like we have good attendance, so thank you for all of you out there watching. I think we will probably keep this meeting to less than 2 hours, but it will be in the maybe minds of those who care about climate action packed. As Commissioner Loisem said, we just finished up a busy legislative session. It was the second session of the legislature, so it was the short one, mostly around emergency legislation, but there was a variety of opportunities coming from the state budget, coming from bills that have been carried over. Folks like Representative Lydia Bloom, many commissioners on this call doing a lot of heavy lifting. So I think we are excited to be here today to talk about continuing implementation of Maine's Climate Action Plan. As the commissioner said, from both the state budget, from the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, which is the state's plans to spend the federal ARPA funds, as well as the now incoming federal bipartisan infrastructure law. We see tremendous opportunity to take action on climate due to funds that when we first all put this plan together, December 2020, we had significant goals, metrics in mind, lots of things that we wanted to do. And now over the course of the last year and a half, tremendous resources coming into the state of Maine to help us achieve those goals. So I think what you'll hear today is a lot of really good news, a lot of progress being made. I will say departments across state government, from Maine Housing to DOT to DEP and lots of others, are doing incredible heavy lifting to make all of the plans that this council worked so hard on to turn them into action. So, and then I think you will hear, and this is really the kind of the most significant presentation we'll give you today, is about the work that we are doing specifically with communities across our state. So we've always known that the Climate Action Plan is not about state government, you know, telling people what to do. It is about people in communities across the state who care about climate, who care about reducing their emissions and preparing their communities, taking action. And so I will pass it off first to two members of my staff. We're going to walk you through the new program that we have just launched, the Community Resilience Partnership. And then Melanie and I will continue to guide you through this morning updates on all of the strategies of the Climate Action Plan. So with that, I will pass it off to Brian Ambrette and Sarah Curran, who have done incredible heavy lifting, working with communities, working with providers, working with other departments of state government to launch what we think is a really exciting plan, and is really what the Climate Action Plan is all about, and that is taking action in Maine's communities. So with that, I will pass it off to Brian.
Thanks very much, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. You'll recall that these two strategies, F and G, really focused on resilience across state government, across our communities, and across infrastructure. And both of these strategies really emphasize the need for technical assistance, capacity building, and funding to support community action that aligns with the goals and strategies in the state plan. So we're really excited to be able to tell you more about the Community Resilience Partnership this morning. Next slide, Cassie. You'll recall we introduced this slide back in December when the governor announced the start or the launch of the Community Resilience Partnership. The goals were to provide grants, technical assistance to communities to help them reduce carbon emissions, transition to clean energy, and become more resilient. all in line with the state's climate action plan. And what we had heard during the course of that year as we were building the partnership from communities was that they really wanted a roadmap. They wanted some guidance on how to do this, a list of suggested activities that would align well with the state's plan. And we're able to provide that through the partnership. So next slide. So when the governor announced the partnership back in December, we had $4.75 million for grants, and we were able to stretch that out into 3 grant rounds that will happen this year and next. We just concluded the first round in the spring of this year. We made 3 types of grants. The first was grants to communities called community action grants. The second was grants to service providers to help communities get started, take those initial steps and plan out their priorities. And then the third was to regional coordinators who would help communities along that long path of implementation, thinking about future projects, getting more complex projects, and importantly, thinking about future funding opportunities, both state and federal. Next slide. So in our first round, we were able to support a total of 75 communities, which is really outstanding. We made 24 community action grants. 2 of those grants were to multiple communities. So we got a total of 29 communities receiving action grants in the first round of funding. And those are in the green pins over there on the map. And then we made 12 grants to service providers. And those 12 service providers are going to work with a total of 46 communities to get those communities enrolled in the partnership and ready to apply for grants in the next round or 2. So either by the late summer round or the round happening next winter. So that's how we get to the 75 communities. And you see that we've got really great distribution across the state in terms of which communities are receiving grants and which are receiving that technical assistance. And then, as I said, we've got 4 2-year contracts with regional coordinators to help all of these communities think about sort of long-term sustainable funding options and implementation over the next couple of years. So next slide. Zooming into those community action grants and the 29 communities here in green who are receiving awards, this is how it gets distributed across the state. We had really good distribution across communities of all sizes. So you see 9 or 10 communities with population below 4,000, that mid-range population between 4,000 and 10,000, and then above 10,000. So we're really pleased that we got a good spread of community sizes across the state. And then looking at social vulnerability, we're really keen to know, are the dollars flowing to the communities that are most vulnerable? And what we see is we've got a little bit of work to do. We did have a number of high and medium social vulnerability communities, but then a bit more coming in on the lower end of the vulnerability. The good news is that our service providers really stepped up in the first round and they reached out and recruited more of the higher vulnerability communities. So we'll see those numbers improve over the coming rounds. And that's really exciting to see. Next slide. And then in terms of what these community action grants are going to fund, we'll see about $500,000 is going to fund emissions reduction projects, and a little over $700,000 will fund resilience and adaptation projects. These are self-selected by the communities. They had a list of about 72 activities to choose from. And so these are the top activities that they chose here. And you see vulnerability assessments right at the top. Those are both infrastructure vulnerability assessments and also community, looking at the social factors around vulnerability. So lots of great projects here, getting into education and outreach, and then some emissions projects for EV chargers, emissions baselines, bike, ped, and alternative transportation. So we've got some really good projects in the mix too that we're really excited about and looking forward to communities building some best practices on and having some lessons learned that they can share once their grants are concluded. Next slide. So we have 2 more rounds of funding in hand, and then the funding is part of the general fund. So we do expect this program to be able to continue on into the future beyond the first 3 rounds. But the next round of funding will be announced next month. And we have grant deadlines already for service providers in the middle of August, and then for the community action grants in the later part of September. And then we'll do a 3rd round, as I said, next winter, spring timeframe. Next slide. And then a related program being hosted by the Department of Transportation is the Infrastructure Adaptation Fund. This was another recommendation that came out of the Community Resilience, Public Health and Emergency Management Working Group. This is funding to support projects that improve the vulnerability or reduce risk for critical infrastructure, both in communities, across state government, and across tribes. So this fund was opened in late April. There's a deadline at the end of this month for a first round of funding. There's $20 million in this fund. This is sourced from the federal ARPA allocation. And the nice thing about this fund is that it can fund all stages of infrastructure work. So scoping up to $10,000 grants, design and engineering up to $75,000 grants, and then construction up to $4 million. And DOT is organizing a grant review team that will be made up of individuals from across state government. So we'll have a lot of different exposure there to different types of projects we expect. And there's a modest match requirement for communities, and there are options to reduce that match requirement by participating in the Community Resilience Partnership. So it's a nice alignment between the Adaptation Fund and the partnership here. Any questions can be directed over to DOT. That's Ann Carter, and her email is down here at the bottom, adaptation.dot@maine.gov. And with this, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah Kern.
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. Cassie, would you move to the next slide, please? We do want to leave a little bit of time this morning for some feedback and questions about the partnership, but I also wanted to just briefly announce a conference that we're going to be hosting that we're really excited about. It's the first Maine Climate Council conference, Communities Leading on Climate. It is going to be June 17th at the Augusta Civic Center, and the conference is intended for community leaders and interested community members who want to know more about how their community can take climate action. We're going to have some morning panels that'll have communities who are already taking action, and they'll share practical tips and insights on how you can get started making climate ready investments, reducing emissions and saving costs through buildings and transportation strategies. So we'll have some really nice case studies in the morning that communities can learn from. And then in the afternoon, we'll have a series of practical action sessions, and we'll have state and federal agencies, community leaders, and organizations who are going to share resources and tools. So we're really excited about the lineup and the opportunity to bring everyone together. Registrations, speaker and program details, and virtual attendance options will be coming in the next couple of days, so please keep an eye on your email box. And we really look forward to seeing you in June. And with that, I'll turn it over to Hannah.
Great, thank you, Brian and Sarah. And I'm reminded, sort of thinking, especially about the Adaptation Fund, about the Resilience Working Group, the Transportation Working Group, sort of talking about the need for this kind of funding. And we were thinking about bonds. We were thinking about different ways to try to come up with just a couple $1 million to get this going. So I just will say, I think it's tremendous to see a $20 million opportunity out there for communities to sort of help with this level of from planning to implementation. Obviously, infrastructure projects can cost a lot, so we know that this is just the start of what's needed. But I will just say, thank you to Judy, and thank you to the Transportation Working Group and all the folks who sort of helped to push for these things. So, but on the subject of communities, I think this really, again, is a big deal. It is kind of the heart of our work. The actions that communities can take, the list of 70 plus things that Brian mentioned, are all of the actions, almost all of the actions of the total climate plan. So we are really asking communities to consider anything that they would prioritize as the most important thing to them, and then the state is finding ways to help. So I think that's a big deal, and the conference itself is something that we certainly would love for any and all Climate Council members to participate in. Municipal leaders, we encourage you to ask your communities, are you participating? Do you know that this is a program that offers both support and funding? We are looking to a lot of state experts, federal experts, community leaders to help share the information about what they've done, how they've done it. So hopefully you can all be there. I know a Friday in June with this beautiful weather is hopefully you can plan ahead. So I just wanted to leave about 10 minutes to hear from you all. I think probably some of you live in the communities that have joined the partnership as we think about how to get to the governor set a goal of 100 communities joining in the first year. That year we're in a good place. We want at least 25 more, but we would love to see as many as possible. So just opening it up for questions and comments from Climate Council members that you may have for Brian and Sarah, that you may be thinking about, comments about your own community, comments about how it relates to sort of your area and focus in this work. And I see Judy, so please, Judy, kick it off.
Thanks, Hannah. The only thing I'll add for the August round of the both the service provider and the community action grants, the Municipal Planning Assistance Program will be releasing the coastal community grants for comparable types of activities, and that's deliberate because this is federal money, whereas community resilience is state money. So we're trying to help provide matching sources and up the size of the grants that communities can get for implementation. So that's on our website, and gonna have staff by mid-June, and we'll get that together. Thanks.
Awesome. And you will see highlighted throughout here. We're excited that Judy is going to see more staff in her office, as well as several other staff agencies of state government to help implement Maine Won't Wait, to help communities. So Judy, super excited about that. We did launch this program on Earth Day in Rockland, and Rockland actually talked about how they had gotten one of those grants in the past. They received a grant from this program. They've taken all kinds of climate actions in that community. So again, I think there are a lot of towns like Rockland across the state who are already leading, and we're just trying to help everybody else catch up. So any other questions or comments, thoughts on your own town or your own issue? Such a well-behaved and quiet group. I will say you're going to hear more from both Michael Stoddard and Dan. I think there are tremendous resources available for communities, some programs coming up that I think really are meant to pair with what communities can do on their buildings with electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So great. Any other questions, comments, ideas?
Lydia. I just want to say this is really terrific to have this and how successful it's been. There are so many towns, including York, that's actually voting on accepting their climate action plan. What I'm thinking is that the connection between, helping, I guess what I want to do, what I'm thinking of doing, is writing something up that shows what we're doing and doing a little bit more PR about it, about what the state is doing and how these towns can interact and how we can encourage people to be writing their climate action plans or whatever. I just would like to, I'd like to be able to put together something that would be a really good marketing piece to encourage communities to do this. And I don't know what you're thinking about in those terms.
Yeah, no, I think, Lydia, it's an excellent suggestion. I think state representatives, honestly, through your networks and newsletters, organizations, again, this is also about community members going to their town hall saying the state is offering both technical support, startup planning grants, implementation grants. You should take advantage of them. So I think, part of the idea of this conference, we look forward to working with groups like MMA to get the word out. I think we want to find every PR vehicle possible to do this. I think probably folks have been listening to Maine Public, has been traveling to every county in the state. They're excited about this program. So we will continue to do that. So excellent suggestion. All right, any other questions, comments? If not, I will pass it back to Melanie. I see Ken has a comment.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. I just wanted to echo our approach to equity with the idea of involving those who a policy or an initiative is being targeted toward. And in this case, communities are very much involved, in some cases leading in the state's efforts, allowing the Community Resilience Partnership to actually echo or follow some of those initiatives. So I would work closely with the communities. You know, there are probably several that are easy to identify. Sarah and Brian, as you roll up and design this June 17th event, and kudos for framing it as you have. It's a great timing, great event. And I'm just suggesting that rather than it being a state event updating folks on the CRP, have it also be a community event to build the community network. Thanks.
Ken, absolutely. And I think that's a great suggestion. I think we are open to ideas. We've been brainstorming with some of you already. We're really seeking specific case studies of communities who are doing good things, and we want to share their stories. And that includes both municipalities and municipal projects, but also, you know, groups like yours on MDI that really have started this and are working in a very comprehensive way, but really community driven. So, Noel.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. One of the things we have done around broadband in the state is we've identified 44 community members across 16 counties in Maine to be county connectors, is what we're calling them. And they're community members. They're not getting paid. You know, they're volunteers who in their communities want to see broadband access. And with all the money that's been coming through, they've been advocating at their local town council meetings, their selectmen meetings, to really help them understand how towns can leverage the resources that are coming their way. And I think if any service provider here or is interested in kind of taking that on to really help people, train them, know what's coming, how that can be leveraged. And if we could, you know, identify folks across all counties who can actually be those champions for, you know, for some of the climate funding, I think that would be really, really great. And it'd be it'll be a grassroots effort and kind of more sustainable because we're building the capacity at the town and county level.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. And I do think we know that there are many, many people out there who care. So how do we organize them? And I think I'd love to learn more about I like the word county connector as well. So Kate.
Just to piggyback, and since Noel didn't get a chance to say that he's from AARP, give him a chance to give a shout out. So if folks want to connect with them, since I'm now officially of age to join, I want to make sure I say that. The other thing is just reflecting, I think I might have said this the last meeting, but if we look at that those numbers Brian was showing, and we think about 2019, when we were voting on the Climate Council plan, the Maine Won't Wait plan, it's pretty remarkable because in some ways, I think we were all had a little bit of trepidation about taking the step forward, knowing that we were going to need to find the resources together. And what I think is really remarkable about what Brian and team have been working on is this pulling together different resources, you know, building upon the federal infusion. And I think just speaking from a medium-sized community, more with a community member hat on, I think what's so important is this technical assistance and building on what Representative Bloom said, like, we all need to help get that word out, because I think that's the part that's so scary for municipalities, and having community connectors and other community organizations supporting towns that are, as we all know, way strapped and way under staffed. And so anything we can all do as a community to build those connections. I know the conference will be about that, but I think that's almost the barrier, is the fear of stepping in. So I just really commend us all for putting the pieces together to make it possible for communities.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. And I know you've been a partner in this, working in, you know, some of the most rural towns in Maine on this work, but so many, I mean, the Climate Council is a group of people who are out there working in communities. So just continue to send Brian, Sarah, all of our team's ideas. And I think that is really well said. So I think that's an excellent last word, unless there's any other comments, and I will pass it back to Melanie.
Thanks, Hannah. Cassie, if you want to put the slides back up. Wonderful, thank you. Well, that is our conversation we just had, is a great nexus to a little bit more information on what we're doing regarding community resilience. I think, as you all may already know, LD 1970 has passed into law. That was an important piece of legislation to both support and authorize the work of the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. As Hannah had mentioned, Director Judy East and her team are going to be expanding, working in conjunction with Hannah's team, and much more engaged with municipal planning and assistance, which is something that we've been hearing from communities for a very long time is needed. And so it's just tremendously exciting for the funding to be leveraged and for the agencies to be staffed, and for the communities to be working in conjunction with our agencies to really be able to meet that need that's been so long standing. And there's a great deal of funding that's going to be available to assist with this, in addition to the Adaptation Fund, as well as the Community Resiliency Partnership Program. We've received $50 million that's been dedicated from ARPA to wastewater and drinking water programs. The breakdown of that, for folks who are interested, is $22 million is being dedicated to municipal wastewater treatment plant projects. $3 million is going to small community grants to repair leaking septic systems. And $25 million is going to public water supplies. From that, we've also been able to leverage that in conjunction with other federal funding sources, the already existing Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund program, as well as the recent federal funding under the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. So the Department of Environmental Protection recently has offered a total of $332 million for 67 infrastructure projects. And that's a combination of grants, loans, and principal forgiveness. This is an unprecedented amount of funding that we've been able to offer in a single round of funding opportunities. So this is just so much more than we ever could have envisioned that we would have been able to accomplish. In addition to that, there's funding that's being dedicated for culvert repairs, wildlife habitat, for emergency management, and as we'd mentioned previously, and I think we'll hear a little bit more about, the additional investments in our Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry for that municipal planning program. So there is just so much that we've been able to leverage this year to try to tackle the strategy of improving the resiliency of our communities. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan Burgess, Director of the Governor's Energy Office.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you. I'm going to give a brief update of Strategy C, reducing carbon emissions through the energy industrial sectors. Going to do a very quick overview of legislative activities and other updates. Like others have said before, it was a very busy few months, and so we'll just try to hit the highlights, and then want to talk about our next steps related to Strategy D, growing Maine's clean energy economy. Next slide, please. So a few of the highlights of legislation passed this session. At the top of the list is LD 1959, an act regarding utility accountability and grid planning for Maine's clean energy future. This was a bill put forward by the governor and sponsored by Senator Stacey Brenner, which ultimately requires a few different things related to our utilities and grid planning. So the first is that it sets minimum service requirements of our utilities and requires quarterly report cards to be laid out by our Public Utilities Commission. really looking at minimum service quality metrics, and then allowing for and requiring additional penalties if those service quality metrics are not met. So in addition to that, so there's a number of different pieces in the bill, but two I think, pieces that the Climate Council will be interested in is first is a 10-year climate plan. So that plan is going to be required of the utilities to, for the first time, look at their system, look at the grid, and really understand the vulnerabilities or the impacts of climate change. So think about that being more, okay, where is there a substation that might be in a floodplain or flood zone, and really looking at it from a grid and operations perspective and the impacts of climate change. So that's the first time that that's been required of our utilities here. And then an additional piece is on integrated grid planning. So really looking at how are we doing this this planning to meet all of the strategies laid out in the climate action plan, that electrification of the heating and transportation sectors, and then the increasing zero carbon resources that are going to be added to the grid. So this requires our Utilities Commission to set up a process, a very kind of involving stakeholders throughout, to look at certain requirements that we are asking the utilities to file information on, and then that will be used to identify a 10-year integrated grid plan with a focus on what are the kind of near-term activities and actions that can be done. Some interesting articles in some of the energy trades. I know not everyone is reading those, but Utility Dive had a nice article about the kind of really kind of first in the nation connection between grid planning and the state's goals, looking at it in this holistic way. And so I think it's an exciting piece of legislation. LD 634 set a cap on, or not set a cap, but set a rate for net energy billing projects. So these are predominantly solar projects that were being paid a certain rate that fluctuated with the price of energy. And LD 634, instead of having a fluctuating price, sets a forward-looking price that reduces risks and volatility of the program. So we'll still see solar move forward, but will be reduce ratepayer cost by as much as 30% for that program. LD 1202 requires the Public Utilities Commission to go out for no more than 20 megawatts of combined heat and power projects that are the fuel source is wood fired, is wood. So when going out for that procurement, the PUC has to consider use of residuals. They have to be highly efficient. They have to be new projects, and they have to look at GHG and economic impacts. And so this was a component of at least a part of strategy of the energy strategy, looking at opportunities for combined heat and power. And so this is a meaningful step in moving that forward in 1202. And then 1913 creates an electric ratepayer advisory council at the Office of the Public Advocate. Members are appointed for 3-year terms and are looking at a wide variety of issues related to ratepayer costs, but also looking at how to make sure that our programs are reaching Maine people and are effective. And so the first time a council like this has been created, and exciting to have the public advocate leading that, and for many members of the Climate Council to be involved in that. That's just 4 pieces of legislation that, there were many more passed that we could spend a lot of time going through, but those are some of the key ones that were passed that I wanted to touch on. Next slide. So I'm actually right across the river in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So I can see Maine, but I'm here in a meeting with my counterparts from the other New England states and some officials from the Department of Energy and others, meeting on a number of different issues. But one that's taking up a lot of our discussion time and a lot of our planning are the funding opportunities in the IIJA, the infrastructure bill that was passed. Next slide, please. So overall, the Department of Energy was provided $62 billion in funding in the infrastructure bill. There are something like 50 to 60 different initiatives and programs within those, and so I won't go through all of those, but I did want to highlight there are really significant opportunities for the state of Maine within that. There's $3.5 billion for weatherization through the weatherization program at Maine Housing. There's $500 million for energy efficiency and clean energy investments at schools, $550 for conservation block grants.
I can't hear him.
Yes, Dan's voice went away.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, sorry, hotel Wi-Fi. So $500 million is state energy program. These ones, so these grants or these programs can be formula funded, meaning each state will get a certain amount over a 5-year period, or they can be competitive. And so we're working hard across our office with GoPep and others across state government and partners like Efficiency Maine and municipalities to understand kind of what are the opportunities within those formula and competitive funds, and how do we best take advantage of them. I think notably, there's also more than $20 billion for grid transformation or grid upgrades. The Building a Better Grid initiative is how it's being cast. And some of those programs, you're beginning, if you kind of seeing in the press, you'll see this week there was a $2.5 billion notice of intent where the department is saying, okay, this is what we're planning to do, give us your feedback, and then we will move forward with the program later this year. And so we're monitoring those closely and working to see what the opportunities are for Maine. Again, these formula grants, you get into these billions of dollars, but they are being spread across 50 states and 2 tribes. And so, there is really big opportunity, but there's also, with these formula grants, at least there's some of that will be just the amount that we get. Next slide. So also worth noting is the Department of Energy will talk a lot about deployment. The Secretary says often it's deploy, deploy, deploy. And so there's a lot of different opportunities for research and development, but they're also focused on getting technologies deployed. And so there's funding for clean hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, advanced nuclear, demonstration projects in rural communities, and so there's just a whole suite of different programs and initiatives that we're looking at and looking to work with you all as the opportunities become available. So I'm happy to. Don't have time to get through all of them today, but if anyone has any, wants to talk through any of these, we're up to we're going through them actively right now as they come out each week, and happy to talk about partnerships and opportunities there. Next slide. This morning's theme seems to be about partnerships. So we've heard about the resiliency, community resiliency partnership. We are excited to be moving forward with the Clean Energy Partnership, which is the Energy Office's program that funded by MJRP to really look at workforce and innovation within the state of Maine. So as you know, the governor's put forward a goal of doubling the number of clean energy jobs in the state by 2030, and getting us to about 30,000 jobs in the clean energy sector. And we have $6.5 million in our office from MJRP to put forward programming related to workforce development and training in coordination with the Department of Labor and others. And then additional funding of $1.5 million for business support and innovation opportunities. And we're working through those right now. To advise this work, we're establishing an advisory group of folks and experts from across Maine, both in industry, the education sector. We're looking at other state government. We're looking at a wide group of individuals and those with expertise to advise us on, okay, if we have this funding, we want to advance the clean energy workforce and innovation space, how do we best do that? And so our first meeting It's going to be next week, May 17th. It's on our events page on the GEO webpage, and encourage folks to join. But it's something that we're really excited about as we look at the workforce that's needed to help us meet our clean energy goals. Next slide. So those are my slides. I think next we're gonna roll into a new video which highlights the opportunity for clean energy careers.
Awesome, thank you, Dan. I know Cassie's got to queue up the video is coming. We got to change, but you will see Celebrity Dan, and thank you to Tony and the entire communications team who've been rolling out these videos. So after you see it and love it, please share it widely and encourage all your friends and neighbors to join the clean energy workforce.
I'm from Rumford, Maine, Milltown kid. Central Maine, I grew up on a small dairy farm. I came to the US looking for opportunities.
Climate change is here, and it's something that we need to try to reduce its impact on our lives.
It impacts not just the livability of the state, but people's ability to make a living here.
Clean energy is the future. Fossil fuels are not a reliable source, but the sun is, and so is wind.
The clean energy economy, to my mind, just talks about the opportunities that exist. Maine is a national leader. The governor has set a goal of more than doubling the number of clean energy jobs in the state to 30,000 by 2030.
There's a chance to address the big problems that are ahead of us while also doing economically well. If I can help you advance your career in clean energy and sustainability, I want to do that.
By working with schools, industry, and innovative companies, the Clean Energy Partnership is our move to build the skilled workforce.
Biggest goal I've always had is to own a solar company. That may not be noticed in a very big scale here in the US, but in developing countries, they're going to have a huge impact.
We monitor just over 3.5 gigawatts across the US.
PowerCell itself stores the energy that's produced by solar panels into a battery. I work with the Puerto Rican market. It's kind of like a customer support role and also a sales role.
I couldn't have told you at 18 or probably even 20 that I was going to end up in this field.
We have to do something that will be everlasting, generation after generation.
They're good paying jobs. They are the jobs of the future.
I'll take any chance to talk to a group of students. I don't want them to think I have to leave Maine to have opportunities.
So this investment in advancing clean energy, energy efficiency really does make Maine more energy independent. Working in renewable energy, you're doing something positive for the environment.
I know that I'm making a change. Everyone in this office is. Anyone and everyone that is in the industry of clean energy in the state of Maine is making a difference.
Awesome. Go team, please. This video, I believe, is available at mainewon'twait.org. So go check it out, share it with all your friends and neighbors. Jesse, I see your hand up.
I'm sorry, that was an accident. I just wanted to give a clap.
That was a high five.
That was a high five. Yeah, exactly.
Rob, your hand's up. You're next.
No, I was going to clap too.
Okay, good. All the high fives. Excellent. It says the video will be available later today at mainewon'twait.org. Okay, so give it till later today. We'll remind folks of that. Dan, any other last words of inspiration after that?
Just that it's an incredibly exciting time and a really opportunity to move forward with the clean energy economy as we strive to meet our targets. And I think the funding opportunities that are available, the momentum that we've built are real, and continues to be a real big opportunity for it.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, some folks from this Zoom screen are involved in this partnership launch. It really is about partnering with industry and education. I will say, when I see things like the amount of money we have for weatherization and the need for that workforce to be grown to meet that challenge, there's so many exciting opportunities, but also some big lifts. So we, again, look forward to hearing from all of you. Lydia.
Yeah, I just remembered what I was going to ask. All this federal funding, Dan, that you mentioned, is this going to be over how many years? I mean, how many years are we going to be able to use this money?
Generally, there's a 5-year timeline for a lot of it. I think some of it will depend program by program about what, when the program actually launches and when the funds need to be spent. But I think we're generally looking at a 5-year horizon for a lot of this.
Great. Thank you. All right. I'm going to pass it off to the co-chair of our transportation working group, Rob Wood. Joyce is, I think, in New Orleans at a transportation conference. So it's great to have you here, Rob, and I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Director Pinkery. Good to see you all here today. As Hannah said, I'm the co-chair of the Transportation Working Group of Choice. Stepping in for her today, I'm the Director of Government Relations and Climate Policy for the Nature Conservancy in Maine. So excited to share some updates with you all on our transportation strategies in Maine Won't Wait, specifically focusing on legislation that was enacted this session, as well as agency actions, and then also pointing to some of those exciting funding opportunities that'll touch down in the clean transportation space. I think we can go on to the first slide. So starting out with legislation that was enacted by the legislature this session and signed into law. 3 in particular that we're pointing out here, but there are others as well. So Senator Vitelli's bill, LD 1579, puts the state's lead by example goals for zero emissions vehicles for state fleets, school buses, and municipal fleets into state law. I know that that law also includes a provision that will make it easier for school districts to lease electric school buses. So that's exciting. So really just setting some good targets for the state and school districts and municipal fleets. LD 2003, that's Speaker Fecto's affordable housing bill. So that takes a number of important and exciting steps to support not only affordable housing across the state, but also compact development. So it supports infill housing, provides municipal assistance for land use planning, and then also encourages affordable housing through zoning reforms. And then also Commissioner Loisem already spoke to LD 1970. I just wanted to point out that in terms of transportation infrastructure resilience, there's a provision in LD 1970 that encourages upsizing of culverts at road stream crossings in the unorganized territory. So that's a good step forward in terms of increasing flood resilience in the UT. In terms of Department of Transportation actions, a couple of exciting pieces to point out here. So the state has relaunched the Go Maine statewide ride sharing program. So you may have read about this in the news, very exciting. If you or your organization is interested in participating in Go Maine and taking advantage of that, please reach out. And then also, as you may have heard, Maine DOT is working on a long-range transportation plan that includes specifically, there's several components to it, but it also includes specifically a statewide strategic transit plan, as well as a statewide active transportation plan. And I know they're looking for public input into those plans right now. So, so please check that out if you haven't had a chance to provide input yet on those plans. Next slide, please. So next, going to talk a little bit about funding opportunities, starting with transportation electrification funding opportunities. So the state budget included $3.5 million for continuing the state's electric vehicle incentive programs administered by Efficiency Maine. So those incentives were set to run out later this year. So really important and exciting that the legislature and the governor worked to ensure funding continuity for EV incentives. There are also substantial new funding opportunities for charging infrastructure. So first, the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, as you already may know, allocated $8 million for public EV charging infrastructure. And then the bipartisan infrastructure law includes $19 million in formula funding over 5 years for EV charging on public roadways. So that's, you may be hearing about the NEVI program that will be that funding will be coming in the coming months. The state is working currently on a plan to submit to take advantage of that funding. There's also a discretionary grant program through the NEVI program that includes $2.5 billion available nationally. So fingers crossed that the state will be able to access some of those funds as well to build on the $19 million in formula funding. Very exciting that the state is ramping up a clean school bus initiative. So one of the funding streams that was made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law is the EPA Clean School Bus Program. That's $5 billion available nationally, also over 5 years, I believe. And so, you know, the Department of Education and the DEP and GOPIF are working with school districts and with other partners to help school districts take advantage of that program and to apply for that first round of funding that's open for applications now, I believe, or if not, it's about to be open for application. So if you're listening in and you're engaged in your school district, or you're a school district official and you'd like to see your school district purchase an electric school bus, this is a really exciting big opportunity. So please reach out to learn more about that. And then there are plenty of other programs as well through the bipartisan infrastructure law that will support transportation electrification. So the electric or low emitting ferry pilot program, there's a carbon reduction program, transit electrification program. So I won't get into all the details now, but quite a few other opportunities as well. Next slide, please. So as you know as well, reducing vehicle miles traveled is a key component of the Maine Won't Wait transportation strategy. So quite a few funding opportunities and actions around public and active transportation and land use to update you all on. So the state budget included $15 million for DOT multimodal programs. So that's really exciting. Didn't have to rely on bonding this year for those programs. There's also in the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, $5 million for workforce transportation pilots. I just mentioned the carbon reduction program that was made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. That includes $30 million in formula funding that can support emissions reduction and planning, including public transit investments, active transportation investments, and complete streets. And then there is also a very transformative investment in broadband deployment, as you all are aware, made possible through the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, and then also a significant additional federal funding coming down the pipe through IIJA to support broadband deployment, so supporting communities across the state to upgrade broadband and make remote work opportunities available for more Mainers. There's also $3 million in the state budget for the Department of Economic and Community Development Housing Opportunity Fund. So that will support improved land use planning for communities. And then also very important that the Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry has substantial new capacity authorized through the state budget to support municipal land use planning. So several new positions there that I know will be important for Judy East's team at DACF. And I think we have one more slide before we wrap up. Great, and so on the transportation resilience side, there are a couple of important funding and opportunities to point out and actions that Maine DOT is taking. So also through the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's a new program called the Protect program. It's formula funding. The state is eligible for $34 million for transportation resilience and planning improvements. There's some caveats there, but it's an exciting opportunity, and that'll be available for highway transit and certain port projects. There's also a discretionary grant opportunity available through that same program, the Protect program. So $1.4 billion available nationally there. And then lastly, just want to note with respect to the long range plan, Maine DOT is developing a resilience plan to include with the long range plan as well. So I think that is what we have today, and happy to try to help answer any questions if folks have them.
Thanks, Rob. That was a lot to cover. I think I don't know about you all, but I have trouble keeping track of all of the funding opportunities and what they can be used for. And I'm really grateful to the work of the Transportation Working Group to coordinate, between all of our partners to make sure that we're leveraging all of that funding in the way that will be the most effective for the state. So thank you so much for everything you and Joyce at DOT and others have been doing to continue moving us forward to make the best of these opportunities. And I think with that, we're going to turn it over to Michael Stoddard from Efficiency Maine Trust.
Thanks, Melanie. I'm going to try and provide a quick update on strategy B, which related to modernizing our buildings. So that's about heating systems and building envelope measures. So next slide, please. I'll quickly summarize the most notable sources of new funding and the new initiatives that we're launching from the Maine Jobs and Recovery Act allocations of that ARPA federal funds. I'll talk a little bit more generally about how we're doing with the transition to clean heating and cooling, which is really talking about heat pumps. I'll give a quick recap of some state legislation and then talk about a couple of other funding opportunities that we're aware of. Next slide, please. So allocation number one that's relevant to buildings is the $50 million that the MJRP allocated for energy efficient housing. I'm only covering some of the initial allocations of that fund. As I think Dan Burgess said a moment ago, we have between 4 and 5 years to spend these federal funds. So these are the initial initiatives. One is the Affordable Homeownership Program. Greg Payne has been doing a lot of work on this out of the GOPIF office. And that will require, that will offer incentives, but in return for those incentives, it will require that the projects that are being developed switch to only electric heating systems, not using any fossil fuel for anything in the house. It also will require that those buildings be EV ready and PV ready, which means that the electrical service will have to be sized big enough to handle that addition of that load in the future, and that you will you will at least establish the electric raceways where the conduit can run from the panel out to where it would end up being used. The second initiative is going to use another $10 million from the MJRP, and it has another $10 million in addition to that, that would require new construction for rural affordable rental housing. And it has similar criteria to the Affordable Homeownership Initiative I just mentioned. So again, no fossil heating systems. It's all electric systems that are high efficiency, and then making it EV ready and PV ready. And in addition, having internet connection in every unit. So that is the first chunk of the MJRP money that is going to really make things start happening out in the field, starting very quickly. Next slide, please. So to complement that $50 million, a second slug of $50 million was allocated to be run through some initiatives at the Efficiency Maine Trust. And I've just summarized them here on this table. The first initiative we're launching, we actually launched it on May 1st, was Efficiency in Hospitality. This is for businesses that are involved in travel, tourism, and hospitality. So hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, other venues involved in hospitality. We're going to prioritize high efficiency heat pump systems, and we have $4 million to do that. And we will issue a series of competitive solicitations to get proposals for the use of those funds. The first one was launched on May 1st, so just a week ago. The second initiative will be $15 million towards high efficiency systems for local government, schools, and congregate housing. I'll talk a little bit about that, a little bit more about that in a second. But again, our priority will be for high efficiency HVAC systems, but we will also look at lighting and refrigeration and other options as well. The third initiative, I think Hannah referred to a moment ago. There are a number of things going on for weatherization. One is at Maine Housing, which I'll talk about in a second, but this is to complement what Maine Housing is doing. This is for low and moderate income weatherization projects in low and moderate income households. We do require a small customer copay to go with these incentives, but will cover 90% of the project cost. It's dedicated for insulation projects, and we'll be launching that. Well, we've already launched it with some other funds, and then we'll be switching over to the MJRP funds very soon. Then the fourth initiative is for manufacturing, and these will be customized projects that will apply on a case-by-case basis, and we have $6 million set aside for that. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give people a little bit more flavor of what's going on with heat pumps. It was exciting a couple of years ago, and it keeps getting better. So if people want, to look at something that we can be proud of and excited about, this technology continues to surpass our expectations. One of the more exciting elements of that is that they're coming to us in more configurations, which means we can apply them to a wider variety of uses. The VRF system you see on the left, that's that brick facade there is at the Freiburg Academy, and that's a diagram of how a VRF heat pump system can provide cool air in rooms that need to be cooled simultaneously while it's providing warm air in rooms that need to be warmed up. So it's a heat pump system for a whole building. That doesn't always work great when you have maybe apartment buildings where you want to bill the customers separately for their heating. And the vertical terminal heat pump system and also the packaged heat pump systems now are a great plug and play replacement. You see these all the time. If you go stay in a hotel, you see that little panel over there and the soffit above it. That's where the little heating system lives. It's usually using an extremely inefficient heating system, and they now make heat pumps to slot into that cabinet and replace the old crummy system. So we're hoping to use this extensively for the hospitality, and it also is a very good solution for affordable housing, multifamily units. Next slide, please. So in case people were wondering, we really are seeing results. You see that we started these programs back in FY13. That black vertical bar identifying Governor Mills' 100,000 heat pump goal was launched at the end, was launched in FY19. And our goal was to get to 100,000 additional heat pumps by 2025. And last year we added 28,000 heat pumps, and we're on pace to do about the same this year. This is even during a pandemic. So we are now projecting that we will reach the 100,000 goal before 2025. And this is what scaling up and market transformation looks like. And it's really exciting. And we were on a phone call, Dan Burgess and I, last week with one of the leading manufacturers in the country. And they said Maine has the highest per capita heat pump penetration in the country. So they look at Maine and they tell all the other states that Maine is the poster child for how to do it right. So I'm not quite sure what we're doing right, but we're getting it going.
Michael, I just want to apologize that all the folks on the Zoom screen don't have those little celebration things. That's why people were raising their hands.
I'll visualize it. I'll just imagine.
You visualize it. No, I just would say this is a super.
I can barely hear you over the deafening roar.
Exactly. It's thrilling. So thank you, Michael. And thank you for Efficiency Maine, who's done a lot of heavy lifting on making this happen.
Next slide, please. There were several bills. I will leave the details to folks to read through later. It was noteworthy that the appliance standards regs that came out of Melanie's shop were approved by the legislature. A little bit more money was allocated and appropriated to go towards, I'm doing these in reverse order, towards the manufacturers, and that grew out of the work that we recommended at the Maine Climate Council for the establishment of an industrial task force. The things that Greg Payne's team and Dan Brennan's team are working on with affordable housing and those incentives they're providing to require electric HVAC systems has been codified now in LD 1656. So that'll become required in future affordable housing developments. So those were some exciting developments that came out in the last session. I think we have maybe one more slide. Yeah, I just wanted to try to touch on a couple of other areas. One is that the building codes work continues. A couple of years ago, the MUBEC board, which is the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Council, code, was updated to 2015 levels, and work is underway now to adopt the 2021 versions of all those. So that will finally catch Maine all the way up to where we really should be on our building codes and put us in a great spot for all new construction. And then I said I was going to mention work at Maine Housing. Part of the list of new federal funds that Dan Burgess mentioned will include $31 million for weatherization for low income customers through the LIHEAP program. And that's going to be, through the weatherization assistance program, but that goes to LIHEAP customers, which is going to really significantly increase their budgets and really help us hit our numbers for what we put in the Maine Won't Wait plan. And then Dan already covered those other state energy program projects. So that wraps it up.
Lydia.
Thank you, Michael. It's wonderful news about the heat pumps. I heard that also from someone in Brooklyn who said we look to Maine. But my question is about the technology that's used in the heat pumps, the internal substance that's used in the heat pump, which is something that we had to sort of excuse from regulation in the ENR committee. Is there some technological development to use another substance that's not so toxic?
By toxic, are you talking mostly about the global warming potential or something different?
Yes, in that particular. I know it's a closed system, but if it leaks, it's bad stuff.
Yeah, so our evidence suggests that they don't leak very much, at least not the ones that are in homes. Furthermore, you'd have to leak it all out every year in order to have greater greenhouse gas emissions than what you're saving by displacing oil. So the risk in terms of greenhouse gas emissions is low, and the benefit is very high. But the really more valuable or direct answer to your question is yes, they are working on substitutes. They are coming forward. They're coming, you can imagine they're in every air conditioner and every refrigerator in the country. So the feds are taking it very seriously, and they're on a pathway to gradually change over to lower and lower GWP refrigerants. And when they do, they'll slot right into these same units. But people should be assured, this is a little bit like the CFL issue and the mercury. It's true there is some in there. It's the same. It's also true that these refrigerants have some issues, but the benefits of savings to the greenhouse, to the atmosphere are vastly, vastly superior by switching to a heat pump to get you off of the oil.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Michael. And Melanie's department did heavy lifting on regulations around HFCs, which are the substance we're talking about, the super pollutants. And again, I think we've seen the Federal Department of Energy take a real focus on heat pumps. They have recognized what a great job Maine is doing, and I will say they're investing in the technology that would also continue to help phase out the HFCs. So really good point and really good answer to that as well, Michael. I will pass it off now. I see Commissioner Amanda Beal. We're going to talk about strategy E, about protecting our natural resources, protecting Maine's environment, working lands, and increasing carbon sequestration. So Amanda is going to talk about the work of her department and some highlights coming out of the state budget around forest carbon work. And then we're going to go to the chair of our Science and Technical Subcommittee, Ivan Fernandez, the co-chair, and he is going to talk about Maine's work to launch the Maine Climate Science Information Exchange, which is sort of the new and better name for the hub that we talked about in the Climate Action Plan. How do we create a hub for climate science and data, and the exciting work to launch that ahead of when we said we would do it in the climate plan. So with that, I'll pass it off to Commissioner Beal first.
Thank you, Hannah, and good to see you all this morning. Happy to be here. So yes, I am going to cover just a few examples of all of the work that's going on around our, a lot of what came out of the natural and working lands recommendations, but I'll also give some updates about DMR as well. So the first one I'll talk about is the Forest Carbon Task Force report. You might remember me giving an update about this group the last time we met, but they met monthly all last year and finalized their report at the end of the year. And what we're really excited about on that front is that we were able to, in the supplemental budget, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a few minutes, we were able to get a couple of really, or a few really key positions that were recommended in that report. And so one of which is a senior planner position that's going to bring some expertise as it relates to forestry and carbon sequestration and carbon markets to the department, as well as 3 new district forester positions. And this is really speaking to the task force recommendation to increase staff within the Maine Forest Service to develop training modules for landowners and loggers and foresters on climate-friendly forest management practices and to allow for greater outreach to landowners. The next piece of work that has been underway is a soil carbon study, which was a result of LD 937. Which directed our department, DACF, and IF&W to work together to identify opportunities to enhance carbon storage in natural and working lands. We were able to obtain a grant from the U.S. Climate Action Alliance, or the U.S. Climate Alliance, which has been enabling us to work with the University of Maine and Ivan and some others there. And we were able to complete an interim report that was submitted to the legislature in March. And now we're in an engagement phase. So we've had stakeholder roundtable discussions around agriculture and wetlands and natural lands. And we have one on forestry coming up. And the forestry discussion is really complementary to the work of the Forest Carbon Task Force, which focused more on discussing opportunities around above ground carbon storage. And a final report with recommendations will be submitted to the legislature later this fall. And then on the supplemental budget front, Governor Mills moved requests forward to better equip our natural resource agencies to address climate change and its impacts, which we greatly appreciate. And we also appreciate the legislature's endorsement of those requests by passing a supplemental budget that meets the real needs on this front. And in particular, I'll share some highlights about DACF, IF&W, and DMR climate positions to support Maine Won't Wait implementation and planning. So positions within our department at DACF, we were able to get additional LMF staff, 1 senior planner and a paralegal assistant position, which increases our capacity to protect our natural and working lands. And we were also able to add a number of new positions to enhance our ability to address invasive plants and pests and increase municipal support, which you've heard about a few times this morning, so I won't go too far into that, and also increase stewardship of our state parks in the form of restoring 18 state park ranger positions to help, which is also going to help us face the record numbers of visitors that we've seen in recent years while we're facing real impacts of climate change. We also will be getting additional funding for enhancing groundwater monitoring and numerous tools and equipment to support land management and monitoring. For inland fish and wildlife, they got 2 positions directly related to Maine Climate Action Plan, a senior resource biologist that will focus on climate. This person will coordinate the department's climate activities, work on the strategic plan as it relates to climate, and participate in all of the various climate-related committees. They also will be hiring for a senior resource biologist that will focus on invasives, particularly aquatic invasives, but also some terrestrial. Invasives are one of the top threats to fish wildlife habitats as identified in IF&W's State Wildlife Action Plan. And for the Department of Marine Resources, they have many scientific and policy related positions that deal with climate change on a day-to-day basis. And under the leadership of Governor Mills, she agreed with the need for additional capacity within the agency. And within the last biennial budget, they've added 12 new positions that focus on research around offshore wind, public health related issues with shellfish, focusing on biotoxins, right whale distribution, presence of white sharks, as well as scientific assessment capacity to monitor changes in the marine environment from year to year. So one other bill that I'll mention is LD 736, which passed an act to enhance the ecological reserve system. And this increases the average caps on ecological reserves, which will allow the Bureau of Parks and Lands to designate more acres as reserves going forward. And this was something that was discussed within the Natural and Working Lands group as we were forming recommendations for the Maine Climate Council. On the funding front, we are excited, of course, about the $40 million that was allocated to LMF in the biennial budget. And this is, of course, to do the important work of helping to meet the goal in the Climate Action Plan to protect 30% of Maine's natural and working lands. $50 million of ARPA funding was allocated to our state parks, and we're excited to be working on resiliency projects starting this summer. And that pertains everything from drainage work that increases structural resilience and helps mitigate the risk of weather-related damage that could lead to rapid deterioration of important cultural sites. We're doing shoreline work, replacing culverts, and a number of other infrastructure projects that are really going to build resilience in our state parks. There's also $50 million being invested in our heritage industries for farms, forestry, and fishing businesses. And just because we're in the thick of it, I'll share that the agriculture funding that we are giving out grants for infrastructure and resiliency for food and food system resilience in farms. We received over 850 applications for that funding. So it's taking a little bit longer for us to wade through that than we had anticipated, but we're hoping to announce awards in June. And then finally, there's this Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act fund, funds that are making funds available for culverts and wildlife connectivity, coastal resilience, coastal and forest monitoring. And I know that there are numerous conversations going on within agencies, as well as interagency discussions and discussions with numerous stakeholders, talking about how to best leverage this opportunity for Maine. So lots and lots of good stuff happening, and I will leave it at that.
Great, thank you so much, Amanda. And passing it off to Ivan Fernandez. Maine always has the best slides. Well done.
Thanks, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. I'm trying to click around here. So I've been asked to take a few minutes just to describe the Maine Climate Science Information Exchange, or MCSI. The Maine Climate Science Information Exchange is a new initiative to support work of Maine Won't Wait, its implementation and for future updates of the Maine Climate Action Plan. The funding was initiated by Congresswoman Shelley Pingree as a community-funded project request and supported by Senator Angus King as a congressionally directed spending request. Funding was secured through Congresswoman Pingree's request as part of the approved FY22 appropriations bill. This funding is a 2-year grant that will establish an Office of Climate Science Information Coordination at the University of Maine with statewide responsibilities as called for in Maine Won't Wait. The purpose of MCSI will be to serve as a real-time gateway to information about ongoing research, recent science, and critical monitoring and data that supports Maine's science-informed work in climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. Can I have the next slide, Cassie? MIXI will serve as a coordinating hub to facilitate statewide collaboration in climate change relevant research and for key environmental monitoring and data. MIXI will strengthen Maine's knowledge base in real time and support the work of the Maine Climate Council, working groups, subcommittees, and those throughout Maine engaging in an informed and cost-effective climate response. MIXI will work to serve as a boundary spanning entity between stakeholders and the science community to promote the co-production of science most relevant to Maine's climate response needs. MIXI won't duplicate, but point to and collaborate where work is already ongoing in this realm. MIXI also have resources to support professional development opportunities for particularly postdoctoral fellows and graduate students to engage in this work. And the last slide, please. The timeline for this work is as follows. We anticipate developing a proposal in support of this project to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration over the summer, with the anticipated approval in the fall of this year, 2022. I'd note that this winter we devoted some time to examining what other states are doing in climate work and how their institutions of higher education, particularly the land grants, have been involved and are involved in that process across the US. Some of what we learned was that states with the most engaged climate work often had mechanisms to achieve the functions proposed for this coordinating office. But we also learned that each state developed its programs unique to the needs and history of that state. And there was no singular blueprint for how these goals were achieved. Therefore, we will be building MIXI to meet Maine's unique needs in support of the critical work on climate underway and to come. Upon anticipated approval of the NOAA proposal, we expect funding at the university to begin by the late fall or early 2023, at which time we will commence hiring. While MIXI will encompass a wide range of climate relevant science, core staff will be hired with expertise, particularly in 3 areas, to include marine ecosystems and coastal communities, agriculture and food systems, and forests and forest products. In the meantime, we've received foundation support to begin a pilot of this work in the marine and coastal community sector, and have recently hired the first MIXI staff member, Parker Gassett, in partnership with Maine Sea Grant to pilot this work, which is now underway. And so we look forward to beginning this work, and we look forward to working with all of you in the years to come. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ivan. Representative Bloom.
Hey, thank you. This has felt really an exciting initiative. What about the data management? What about, taking all of this disparate sources of data about, let's say, sea level rise or something, and putting it so all of the researchers groups that are contributing to it is in a readable and digestible format? Is that going to be a major portion of this, is data management and data interpretation?
It will be in succession. And so from the outset, there'll be work ongoing as part of it to begin to coordinate where the data are. And some of that will be affiliated with the state climate office and Sean Berkel and our state climatologist. The initial emphasis is going to be on identifying where the ongoing work is that directly intersects with the strategies of Maine Won't Wait, and the most recent science, and then progressively to build that dashboard that will reflect sort of the kinds of things the GoPIP dashboard has and build on the climate information. So the short answer is yes, but that's not the immediate emphasis of people's time as we sort of launch this thing. It'll be identifying and helping to coordinate the science that's ongoing. And we can think of many areas in science that are ongoing research that's underway. Things are happening quickly. Mike Starter's graph of rising, exponentially rising heat pump installations is a great example of, we often in science talk about escalating indicators of the changing climate. But there's also escalating indicators of the solutions as well, but they need the best available science. And so that's the first priority. Data are part of it, but it will be not the initial emphasis as we go forward.
Judy.
Thanks, Hannah. I guess I just want to underscore in response to Lydia's Representative Bloom's comment that task and skill of bringing the information from the university to communities is almost always best done by the partner in Sea Grant. Within Maine and nationally. I'm working with Sea Grant on a congressional briefing that will happen to congressional staffers next week with 4 other Sea Grant programs throughout the state or throughout the country. And it's just so exciting to hear all the things that we're doing and to be able to convey that to the congressional staffers next week. And so I just wanted to say that. And also, while I'm waxing on about Sea Grant and NOAA, to clarify a comment earlier I made about the coastal community grants, those are NOAA funding that comes through the Department of Marine Resources. And so that's what I meant by federal funding, that's where that comes from. So just wanted to clarify that point and say, yay.
Thanks, Judy.
All right, thanks, Ivan. This has been great. Oh, it looks like Kate wants to say something. Oh, all right.
I can message Ivan later.
All right, this is wonderful. You're all engaged and paying attention and have great questions. So we really appreciate that. Next up, we've got Representative Bloom and Paige Nichols from Department of Education. But before I turn it over to Representative Bloom, I just wanted to note that it is unfortunately her last term with us as a legislator, at least for now. We might see you back again. Look forward to that, and wanted to just thank you for your leadership on these issues that, as I've told you, you have been so passionate about the work that we're doing to address climate change in Maine. And I think that you've just been a tremendous force on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, helping push for the work that we've all been doing. And so have very much appreciated your voice in all of these conversations, and look forward to having you continue to be a part of them in your next capacity. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Loisem. That's been very nice. I really appreciate that. It's been the honor to work on this project from the beginning. And I'm so proud of the state of Maine and all of the people in this Maine Climate Council of what we've produced and what we continue to do. And I feel so excited that we're going through all these strategies and we're understanding what we've accomplished thus far. And we continue to accomplish things in especially this strategy, which is becoming more and more, I think, very important to get all the information out about what we are doing and how we are helping our state meet these challenges. And one of the most important thing, as I had said, was it was about the children and about our young people. And this bill was an emergency piece of legislation in this year, this last session, and it was to establish this pilot program to encourage climate education in Maine public schools, one of our strategies, very specifically, and that passed, and it got funded very, very generously funded. So it is a $2 million 3-year pilot program that is going to take place in all 16 counties in the state of Maine. And it will also have a person at the Department of Education that will be administering this and making sure the equity considerations are taken into account. So very, very proud of the grassroots support that this bill got. The students and the teachers who cared so much about this organized themselves and really pushed this bill and made it happen and got this generous funding because of that organization. So I was very, very pleased to be working with them. They get all the credit for really making this happen. And I'm so excited to hear more from Paige Nichols about what the Department of Education is going to do. Did you want to talk about LD 1974 in the same breath, or do you want to talk about them two separately?
Lydia, just give us a word on 1974 and then we'll go to
Well,
page.
1974, it is a companion bill in the sense because this is another investment in our young people by expanding this our volunteer network and creating some paying jobs related to climate action in Maine. So this is a very exciting bill because it will also set itself up. It'll exist. And so if there's federal funding, it will come to it. And that was worked on really hard by the sponsor. And, you know, these two are both in our our plan under this heading, and both were accomplished. And so it's really, I think it's a triumph that we got these things passed and funded.
Thank you, Representative Bloom. I'm Paige Nichols. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at the Department of Education. And Representative Bloom, congratulations to you. And you really covered what both of these bills are about. So I don't have to go into great detail beyond that, but I will add to what you said about 1902, that this was really driven by students and teachers. And that makes it, I think, especially exciting for us as we have really as DOE really prioritized educator voice in driving some of these things. So we're super excited, and many thanks to you, Representative Bloom, for your support here. I think we're really lucky in Maine to have support from so many community organizations that are ready to help bring this all to fruition, and all of whom have been a part of supporting this bill throughout. So I think we're really well positioned to make this something really awesome. Where we are at DOE with it, it was just signed on Monday, and it will be enacted on August 8th. So we're in kind of an very early planning phase for it. Certainly folks who have been some of the leading energy behind the bill will be invited into some conversations about how this will all look. As Representative Bloom mentioned, there is money set aside for a position at the department. So that position will be in the Office of Innovation in my office. So we'll be starting the early stages of advertising and hiring for that. So in terms of a timeline plan for what it'll all look like, we don't have that yet, but it's something we're talking about a lot in my office. And like I said, we'll certainly be inviting folks who have been the energy behind this bill into that conversation. I don't think I have anything beyond what Representative Bloom said to add to 1974. Specifically, it's just a little over 200,000 for a pilot and a couple of positions. One of which I think was just announced and began yesterday, Kirsten Brewer. So some of you may have seen that announcement. And the RFA will be released toward the end of the summer with awards made in early fall. Next slide, please. So a few other things I just wanted to mention that we're doing at DOE around climate change. Some of you may know we started MOOSE, it's called Maine Online Opportunities for Sustained Education, as a COVID response. It has evolved since then to be a high quality teaching and learning tool that's widely accessible. There's no login required. And it serves as a model for interdisciplinary and project-based instruction. This year we selected 5 specific topics to really dig deeper into and create PK through 12 learning progressions on those topics. And climate education is one of them. So they worked from August until March, developing a set of, I think, 8 or 10 modules that go through a pre-K through 12 progression. And there's another team working on another set, which will launch at the end of June. The idea behind this being interdisciplinary is that climate education can be taught across all content areas. And we really wanted to create a model for that was widely accessible. The folks creating it are teachers in Maine, and they're connecting with industry experts to develop material that's engaging and project-based. So we're super excited about that. I'll go to the next slide. So we have a new team in my office, which is an interdisciplinary instruction team, and they are working right now on creating some resources for interdisciplinary climate education. Their website and resources will be coming soon. I've been told the end of May, maybe early June. But again, looking at how we can teach climate education across all content areas and come at it from various angles. And then there's two things I wanted to note that are not specific to climate education, but to outdoor and nature-based learning, which I know is a little different, but I think I'd make the argument that connecting students with the natural world helps them develop empathy for our ecosystems and an understanding of climate science. So through REV, Reinventing Responsive Education Ventures, which is a $17 million grant we got through USED's Education Stabilization Funds back in summer of 2020. We've invested over $2 million to support innovative pilots in outdoor and nature-based education. And we are about to release an RFA for programming for this summer through December, specific to marine and coastal ecology. And we have about $3 million in that for the expansion of programming and for new programs. So those are a couple of areas we're investing in, really experiential learning and getting kids outdoors and connected with the natural world around them. I think that's what I've got. I'm going to pass it back to you, Hannah. Thank you.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much, Paige, and thank you for being here. And obviously we've given you all just so many dollar amounts, but I think when you hear about the programs and what is going to be happening, what is happening across the state of Maine in all of these areas is just, I think it's really exciting and meaningful. And this is one area my children have told me that my daughter is in 5th grade and learning about energy systems and wanted to know why she didn't learn about it younger. So Paige, you're on the task. Kate.
Yeah, Paige and Representative, fantastic work. And I know Anya Wright's not on the call, but shout out to her as well. And I'm going to just put in chat, Paige referenced nature-based education. In your networks, there is this event, ironically on Zoom, but for educators and other community members to just begin to share resources so that we can build a kind of sense across the state of how to connect climate and, as Paige said, appreciation for nature. And really that group is, I'm biased and I'm just awed by what they've pulled off with everyone's support.
Well, thank you, Kate, from the Nature Conservancy. We do appreciate that. And just also want to echo my thanks and congratulations to Representative Lydia Bloom. She's not going away from the Maine Climate Council, but she is termed out. So she has done tremendous heavy lifting. So I want to pass it to Jessica Scott, senior staff on my team. She's been leading on a lot of our equity work. I will say that this is sort of the work of the coming months for Climate Council working groups, thinking about the equity subcommittee's recommendations, prioritization, and metrics. There are also some legislative initiatives that have passed. So I will pass it off to Jess to give you the highlights.
Thank you, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. Lots going on. And so I wanted to share just a couple of the advancements for equity that happened across different climate actions and related sectors in the Climate Action Plan. The legislative session, I think, included many important advancements. So this is just a couple of them that I'll highlight for you. And so, of course, we have LD 2018, which has been a really exciting process and bill to follow. LD 2018 adopted definitions of environmental justice in frontline communities, as well as lowered barriers for representation of disadvantaged communities to participate in processes at the Maine Public Utilities Commission. There was also LD 1610, which established a comprehensive data governance strategy and created a number of data management positions to provide both economic and really critically demographic data and analysis across state government. It also established a formal consultative process with the Permanent Commission on the Status of Racial, Indigenous, and Maine tribal populations to really talk about how that data would be collected and then how it would be used. LD 1961 adopted additional goals for state and municipal agencies that affect natural resource management, land use, and development, including goals of promoting housing choice and economic diversity and affordable housing. and addressing disparities in access to educational, occupational, and other opportunities, particularly for low and moderate income Mainers. And LD 506, just another kind of perspective on equity, really starting to think about energy equity and energy burden. This bill, super targeted, exempts from sales tax all electricity consumed by residential customers participating in the low income assistance program for utility bills, which further, again, seeks to decrease energy burden and maximize benefit for those customers who receive this sort of assistance. So that, what I wanted to do there is just take a tour and note that equity is one of these topics that's being addressed across so many policies and so many sectors. The Climate Action Plan gives us opportunities, I think, to look at different sectors and to think about how we are meeting the needs of those who are most vulnerable within a particular kind of intervention or climate opportunity. So in addition to an active legislative session, as Hannah mentioned, the Equity Subcommittee continues to refine, to prioritize, and to develop metrics to track equitable implementation of our Climate Action Plan. So as you're all likely aware, over the course of the next month, the subcommittee will meet with each of the Climate Council's working groups and with the STS to gather input on the 57 draft recommendations contained within the Equity Subcommittee's report, which was released earlier this year. Over the summer, following those meetings, staff will work closely with many of you, with state agencies, with partner organizations to further understand these possible high impact equity actions and to help develop draft metrics to track our success and our implementation of equity recommendations related to the Climate Action Plan. We'll come back together again with the working groups in the fall to review and to finalize a set of recommendations and metrics, and intend to present those to the Climate Council early next year. So a lot of work forthcoming. Really appreciate the opportunity to engage with the Climate Council's working groups to really benefit from the expertise and the deep sector-specific knowledge contained within those bodies to refine, to prioritize, and develop metrics for these equity recommendations. It's worth noting that Maine's work is proceeding in parallel to equity actions nationwide, and we're thinking really deeply about the national equity framework called Justice 40. For those of you who are tracking it, this framework seeks to invest 40% of the benefits from federal climate and clean energy programs in disadvantaged communities. And it certainly impacts the hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into Maine through the IIJA and through other federal grant programs over the coming years. So we're really thinking about how we're complying with Justice 40, but really doing so to leverage these funds as much as possible for those communities who may have been historically marginalized, may face socio-demographic vulnerabilities. Finally, we recognize that this work is really just starting. As many of you are aware, emergency legislation enacted a few weeks ago establishes a ratepayer advisory council at the Office of the Public Advocate to bring together state agencies and advocates to focus on ensuring energy affordability for low and moderate income ratepayers, as well as makes existing resources and programs more accessible. And there are a number of other forthcoming actions being taken by our offices, by other state agency partners, and by many of you, which seek to bring the benefits associated with climate action to all Mainers. We look forward to working with you on these actions over the coming months and years. And I'm always open for conversations about equity, about environmental justice, and how it impacts and benefits your work. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to Hannah.
Great, thank you, Jess. Representative Bloom.
Oh, thank you. Jess, we heard earlier about the social vulnerability index, and how does that work with the equity? I mean, is that a metric that you will continue to use, or are we changing the metric or changing that definition?
Well, no definitions for environmental justice communities were adopted into law just yet. And so right now we've certainly used the social vulnerability index. It's a great kind of initial screen for communities who are experiencing socio-demographic based vulnerability. I'll just note that nationally, there are a few other tools. So for Justice 40 compliance specifically, there's the Climate and Energy Justice Screening Tool, or Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, the CJEST, which was released by the White House. And that also has a number of different parameters of identifying disadvantaged communities. So we expect that the federal government and federal agencies will be employing the CJEST in partnership with state-specific definitions of equity and of disadvantaged communities. The guidance on that is unclear. It's not developed, and it's being kind of developed in parallel by many different federal programs at the same time, but there are a number of tools that we can kind of look to start to wrap our arms around the complexity of identifying specific communities to serve. Certainly, we have many programs already that identify specific people to serve here in Maine. And so I think we're in a pretty good place to both have state-specific measures that make sense, but also to be able to communicate those measures within a national context.
Great question, and thank you so much, Jess. Obviously, this work is really the heavy lifting of the working groups over the next couple of months. So just thank you all. We said once we did the plan, it would be easy going, but I think this is really thoughtful and important work, and I think it will strengthen the way in which the state. We've talked about this sort of massive amounts of funding that opportunity we have, and obviously spending it on the communities and people who need it most. That's really the most important work we can be doing. So thank you. Next slide. So I'm just here to wrap you up, and hopefully Melanie and I will let you go a few minutes early, but just you'll see again, as Sarah said, in the next couple of days, more information on the conference. So again, save the date. Either come or encourage your favorite municipal leaders and climate activists who want to make a difference in their communities to come. Again, we will be tapping many state agency and other leaders to help us share information. So look for more information. And again, I will just say that it really is the strategies of the Climate Council, the heavy lifting all the working groups did that led to all these ideas that are now being implemented in communities. And I think, you know, as a couple of you mentioned, the variety of ways we can get the information out in person, on the internet, through inspirational videos, but really talking to neighbors and in communities. That's how we get this all done. So I will pass it off to Melanie for just the last couple next steps.
Thanks, Hannah. Just wanted to give folks a quick update regarding the greenhouse gas emission report. It is almost final. Appreciate everyone's patience with that. We are planning to hold a webinar that will be available to folks who are interested in going into the details of what's in it. And you'll all be receiving a copy of it as soon as we have it available sometime in the coming weeks. Also, a reminder that our next meeting of the council will be on Wednesday, September 14th. So please hold your calendar that morning for our next meeting. And then also we'll be planning to meet on December 1st with a time to be determined. Although if I were a betting woman, I'd say that will probably be in the morning as well. And with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for your patience and participation today and all of your work on our working groups and your contributions. We've covered a tremendous amount of information, and I hope that you're all able to walk away with the feeling like we've really gotten a lot accomplished this year. This has been pretty incredible, and we've got a lot more ahead of us and a lot of funding to help us get it done. So I don't know about you all, but I'm pretty excited about the future that we're looking forward to continue implementation of Maine Won't Wait. Jessica.
They're giving us
that was a high five,
Melanie. We've given them no other tools, so they're giving us the high five. Great to see you all. Thank you.
Have a great day, folks.